Russia's largest cities are breaking, not from bombs, not from sanctions, but from something far more dangerous. A silent hemorrhage that's draining the very life from Moscow, St. Petersburg, and every urban center across this massive country. The buildings still stand, the streets are still full, but look closer and you'll see the cracks spreading. Factories can't find workers. Offices sit half empty, and the people who built Russia's economy, they're vanishing. This is what the war leaves behind, and what's happening right now inside Russia's cities could reshape the entire country in ways faster than anyone in power wants to admit. But first, let's start with the hidden collapse. Walk through Moscow today, and everything looks normal on the surface. The metro runs on time, cafes are busy, life goes on. But beneath that facade, Russia's urban centers are experiencing a crisis that no amount of propaganda can hide. Russia's unemployment rate has dropped to just 2.2%, which Putin loves to brag about. But here's what he doesn't tell you. That's not a sign of economic strength. It's a warning signal. When unemployment is that low, it means there simply aren't enough people to fill the jobs that exist.
Russia is caught in an unemployment death trap right now that they cannot escape. Right now in Russia, they have extremely low unemployment, just 2.7%.
Around 1.2 million people have joined the military since the invasion started, and that's the official number. Add in the roughly 600,000 casualties through late 2024 and another 800,000 who fled the country, and suddenly, Russia's cities are missing the workers they desperately need. The result? Gazprombank estimates the economy needs about 1.8 million workers, but only 1.7 million people are unemployed. The math, it doesn't work. You can't fill nearly 2 million jobs when you don't even have 2 million workers looking for them. But the real crisis reveals itself when you look at what's actually happening in Russia's largest city as employers compete for workers who simply don't exist. Come with me as we walk through the city that can't find workers. Moscow was supposed to be untouchable, the capital city, home to over 12 million people, the economic engine of the entire nation. But even Moscow is feeling the squeeze, and it's getting worse by the month. Moscow's mayor has openly complained that the city needs 250,000 workers just for construction sites and city maintenance. That's 250,000 people Moscow can't find. Construction projects are stalling, infrastructure upgrades are delayed, and the worst part? Those jobs pay decent money by Russian standards, but there's simply nobody left to do them. Here's the painful irony. Moscow is projected to lose nearly 700,000 people over the next 2 decades, not through decline in services or economic collapse, but through national demographic processes accelerated by war losses and emigration. The city will probably maintain its population numbers only because migrants will continue flooding in, but those migrants often lack the skills Moscow's economy actually needs. What do you think about Russia's collapsing workforce? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Taking into account the historically minimal unemployment rate of 3.5% in the country, there are simply not enough workers in many areas.
And if you're finding this information eye-opening, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one. The brain drain hits Moscow especially hard. This is where Russia's tech sector lived, where its financial services operated, where the best universities produced the country's future. But around 650,000 Russians have fled since 2022, representing 0.85% of the workforce, but including a massive chunk of the country's IT specialists, engineers, and researchers. Those aren't just numbers. They are the people who were supposed to drive Russia's digital economy, build its infrastructure, innovate its industries, and they're gone. Moscow's brain drain looked catastrophic enough on its own, but it was really just exposing a deeper wound bleeding out across Russia's industrial cities. If Moscow is Russia's brain, St. Petersburg is its industrial heart, and that heart is struggling to pump. St. Petersburg has always been Russia's second city, a center of manufacturing, shipbuilding, and heavy industry. But the city is projected to lose close to 467,000 people over the next 20 years, and the effects are already visible in its factories and production facilities. When you look at Russia's industrial output by volume rather than rubles, there appears to be no significant growth since last year. Why? because inflation makes it look like the military-industrial complex is booming, but the actual amount of stuff being produced hasn't meaningfully increased. The factories are running at capacity, yes, but there aren't enough workers to expand production or even maintain current levels long term. The labor shortage in St. Petersburg industrial sector has become so severe that Russian factories hired 47,000 foreign workers in 2024, exceeding the government quota by 16%. These workers came from China, India, Turkey, and Serbia, countries whose citizens need visas to enter Russia. That's how desperate things have become. Russia is now competing globally for industrial workers, something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. And it's not just about numbers. The shortage of workers has increased significantly in industry among highly qualified workers, mainly in cities with a high share of the military-industrial complex. The specialized skills needed for advanced manufacturing, precision engineering, and military production are exactly the ones that are the hardest to replace. St. Petersburg's struggle to find skilled workers looks severe on its own, but the real collapse reveals itself when you track what's happening beyond Russia's two showcase cities. Beyond Moscow and St. Petersburg, the picture gets even bleaker. Russia's regional cities are experiencing what researchers call urban shrinkage, a slow death by 1,000 cuts. More than half of Russian cities have experienced population decline during at least one period since 1989, and in more than a third of centers, the average annual decrease exceeded 1%. That might not sound dramatic, but compound that over years and decades, and entire cities are slowly bleeding out. In Russia's northern regions, there are 12,000 job openings for only 4,500 unemployed people. The math is brutal and simple. There aren't enough bodies to fill the position. In some regions, the number of active vacancies increased by 48% over a single year. And that's not growth. That is just desperation. The resource cities in Siberia and the Far East, the industrial towns in the Urals, the manufacturing centers in provincial Russia, all of them are struggling with the same problem. Young people leave for Moscow or St. Petersburg if they stay in Russia at all. The working age population shrinks, and the cities that powered Soviet industrial might are slowly becoming ghost towns. Here's where it gets really dangerous for Russia's economy. When you don't have enough workers, wages go up. That sounds good, right? But not when it triggers a destructive spiral. The average monthly wage in Russia reached 99,422 rubles in May 2025, a 14.5% annual increase. Adjusted for inflation, that's still a 4.2% real wage gain. Companies are throwing money at workers just to keep them from jumping ship or leaving the country. But here's the trap. The central bank noted that many companies are increasingly unable to keep up with rapid wage hikes and have begun stepping back from what it called a wage race. When companies can't afford to pay competitive wages, they lose workers. When they lose workers, they can't operate. And when they can't operate, the economy contracts. This wage pressure is practically crushing for civilian industries. The defense sector pays premium wages because the government needs weapons production at any cost. But civilian factories, retail businesses, service companies, they can't compete with military-industrial wages, so workers flood toward defense jobs, leaving the rest of the economy starved for labor. The result? Russia's growth is projected to decelerate to 3.6% in 2024 and 1.5% in 2025, reflecting constraints, especially from labor shortages, and that's the optimistic forecast. A Russia limping along at 0.6% growth might seem manageable in the short term, but the real damage becomes visible when you trace how many worker shortages are reshaping Russia's capacity to project power decades into the future. Let's zoom out and look at what this urban collapse means for Russia as a global power, because the implications are staggering. First, economic capacity. The IMF forecasts Russia's average annual growth at 1.7% for the next 5 years, which is actually more optimistic than Russia's actual performance of 1.3% from 2019 to 2023 and 0.6% from 2014 to 2018. This isn't a country building towards superpower status. It's a country struggling just to maintain what it was. Secondly, the brain drain accelerates the demographic crisis. The 650,000 Russians who fled represent the most active segment of the population with high human capital, including IT specialists, finance professionals, biotech experts, and medical workers. These are exactly the people Russia needs to innovate, modernize, and compete in the 21st century economy. Third, Russia's regional power projection weakens. Russia's geopolitical influence is unlikely to return to pre-2022 levels any sooner than mid-century, especially in Europe and the broader global north. When your cities can't find workers to build infrastructure, maintain factories, or staff hospitals, you don't have the economic foundation to project power globally. Fourth, demographic disaster. Russia's natural population decline reached 596,200 people by the end of 2024, up to 20.4% from the previous year. In 2024, deaths outnumbered births by roughly 600,000, the steepest natural decline since the COVID pandemic. That's more than 500,000 people Russia lost in a single year, not to immigration or war casualties, but simply because more people died than were born. The brutal truth? Russia's labor minister told Putin the country needs to find 10.9 million workers by 2030 just to replace people reaching retirement age. That's roughly 2 million workers per year. Where are they going to come from? Not from natural population growth. Russia's fertility rate is 1.41, far below replacement. Not from immigration either. Central Asian workers are finding better opportunities elsewhere. But the deepest fracture doesn't show in the statistics. It reveals itself in the minds of the Russians still living there, watching their country's trajectory and making quiet calculations about their own futures. There's one factor that could accelerate this collapse faster than anything else, and it's the one nobody in the Kremlin wants to acknowledge: the crisis of confidence in Russia's future. When young, educated Russians look at their country's trajectory, they don't see opportunity, they see decline. They see a government that spent over $100 billion annually on war instead of building a modern economy. They see cities struggling to maintain basic services. They see a future where their skills and ambitions have no outlet. By 2025, Russia's real GDP is around 12% lower than it might have been without Putin's policy choices, with cumulative losses exceeding $1.6 trillion. That's $1.6 trillion that could have gone toward innovation, infrastructure, education, healthcare. Instead, it's gone into a war that's destroying Russia's demographic and economic future. The confidence crisis feeds the brain drain, which worsens the labor shortage, which drives up inflation, which reduces living standards, which deepens the confidence crisis. It's a vicious cycle, and there's no clear way out as long as the war continues and the fundamental structural problems go unaddressed. Russia's cities aren't collapsing from bombs. They're hollowing out from within, drained by labor shortages touching every sector. Workers are gone, sent to front lines, driven abroad, or lost to graves. Moscow and St. Petersburg still look impressive on camera, yes, but the economic engine is sputtering. This is Putin's war's hidden cost. Not just battlefield casualties, but a slow-motion demographic catastrophe that propaganda can't conceal. If this breakdown opened your eyes, hit like and drop your thoughts below. Subscribe to stay ahead of shifts reshaping global power.